You're tuned to Back to the 80s with Dennis Wood.
For 5 decades now, the band Tesla has been rocking audiences around the world. They're one of the most successful hard rock bands of all time, selling millions of albums, performing in front of millions of fans worldwide, too. Tesla is currently on tour. They're going to be making a stop here, performing live at the Clearfield County Fair on Wednesday, August 2nd. And I am joined on the broadcast this morning by one of the founding members of the band, Brian Wheat. Brian's not only the bassist for Tesla, but he's also a songwriter, record producer, manager, author, and a talented photographer and artist. And he has not only met some of his musical idols, he's become close friends with them as well. Guys like Joe Elliott from Def Leppard and the legendary Jimmy Page. Brian, thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Hey, it's nice to be here.
My favorite Brian Wheat quote is, "On the 8th day, God created Paul McCartney." Now, I know you're a huge McCartney and Wings fan, as am I, so let's go deep in the Wings 70s catalog, put you on the spot here. Brian, what's your favorite Wings deep cut? Mine's Letting Go from Venus and Mars. What's yours?
Monkberry Moon Delight.
Nice. From Ram.
Right, I think Ram is an amazing album. Now, if you want hit, Band on the Run, Live and Let Die. Good Night Tonight, I think, is amazing.
Yeah.
The bass line on that and all that. Yeah, I mean, you know, Paul McCartney, he had a number one album 3 years ago at 78 years old. So I don't think people really realize how amazing and lucky we are to have him in our life all these years, all these songs, and how many songs he's responsible for besides the Beatles, you know, Wings and other songs he wrote for people. So, yeah, I'm sticking to my story. On the 8th day, God created Paul McCartney.
When I was a kid, I discovered my dad's copy of Rubber Soul, and that blew my mind, changed everything for me. And you had a similar experience, right?
Yeah, it was Revolver, the next album. And you know, that's the funny debate. I have this with people, all my Beatle freak friends. You know, what's the better album, Revolver or Rubber Soul? And, you know, I'm going with Revolver because I think it's more versatile. But, yeah, when I was a kid, I'm the youngest of 6 children. I snuck into my older brother's bedroom, and that Revolver album was there. And I had one of those little close-and-play record players, like little kids' records, like Johnny Comes Marching Home. And I grabbed that Revolver record because I'm pretty sure it was because the artwork on the cover, the drawing and stuff. I put it on, and the first song was Taxman. And it had a scratch, so it wouldn't play. So the first song I ever really heard was Eleanor Rigby. And when I heard that voice, right, it did something to me. And then I realized, you know, that was the Beatles, and that was this guy, Paul McCartney, and that changed my life. I mean, that made me want to be a musician and a bass player. And, you know, unfortunately I can't sing like that, but that's what sent me on my quest.
So in the theater, they always tell you break a leg for good luck, but at the age of 12, you actually did break your leg pretty badly. And that may have actually been good luck because Mom felt bad for you when you were laid up and she got your first guitar. Did you teach yourself how to play?
Yeah, I mean, I started with the guitar, but I wanted to be a bass player like Paul McCartney. So I switched to bass. But, yeah, I broke my leg at 12. And the funny thing about it was Frank Hannon, who I started Tesla with, we both started in the garage together. He broke his leg at 12 as well and had a guitar. So we both kind of connected on that.
What are the chances of that?
Cosmic, I'm telling you.
Now, you guys grew up in Sacramento in high school. That's when you first started getting into cover bands. And you're practicing in the back of an ice factory, and the owner of the factory wants you guys to play with his girlfriend's 14-year-old son. And, you know, you guys are about 16 or 17. That son turned out to be Frank Hannon. And that too reminded me of the Beatles, because John and Paul were like 17. George is only 14. And they originally thought he was too young to be in the band, but he was so good that they took him in and lied about his age.
George. Frank was 14 and I was 18 when I met him. We're 4 years apart. But, yeah, he was 14. I don't think he had turned 15 yet. And I was 18. I was playing, like, with 22 and 23-year-old guys. And
now, was Frank that amazing back then, when even at that young of age, that you said, hey, we'll overlook you being 14?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I saw Frank play, I was blown away.
And you guys have been together ever since?
Yeah, ever since that day we started a band. And that's what became Tesla.
What other bands influenced you when you were young, or even in the cover bands?
I was influenced by Queen, Cheap Trick, Def Leppard, UFO, stuff like that. Beatles, Wings.
Now, you guys went under the name City Kid, and you start making a name for yourselves around the club scene in Sacramento.
Mm-hmm.
Things are going for you, then the singer quits, and that's when Jeff Keith comes into the picture. How did you guys come across Jeff?
A friend that we had that was a mutual friend that me and Frank knew, these girls from this town called Georgetown, and they used to come and see us play, and they knew that the singer was quitting, and they kind of hipped us to it. And they said, we know a guy up in Georgetown that sings real good. So we said, well, have him come down, and he can sit in. We'll listen to him. And that was Jeff Keith.
So eventually, it's you, Frank, and Jeff, and you guys get Tommy Scio on guitar and start to gel.
Mm-hmm.
And again, another crazy parallel between your story and the Beatles. The Beatles got tight playing every night in Germany, and City Kid did the same thing. But you guys were in Guam. Now, how do you end up in Guam?
This guy that got Tesla their record deal, he was our manager at the time, this guy named Steve Klausman. He had a connection with this, talent buyer or whatever in Guam that was taking bands from the west coast of America and putting them in this club for like 3 months at a time. And, the money was pretty good. It was, good money for the time, especially if you were playing, the clubs, playing covers and stuff. So he said, hey, you guys want to go to make some money and maybe learn how to write some songs and stuff. And that's what we did. I mean, we wrote Coming At You Live there, the second song on our first album. That in itself was worth a trip.
So you guys start writing and performing original songs on that trip, and you get a manager, and amazingly to me, you end up with the legendary Ronnie Montrose producing demos for you. How'd that come about?
The same thing. Our manager Steve Klausman, he brought Ronnie in. This guy Steve had a good eye for talent. He didn't really know the business very well, but he really had a good eye and ear for talent. So once he got us the deal, then he wasn't really qualified to take us the rest of the way. But he knew how to recognize talent and could get you to the people at the record companies that would actually listen to a tape back then. Back then, you'd send in a demo tape on cassette, and based on that, you could get a record deal. But, those days are long, long, long gone.
Well, in '86, you guys get signed to one of the major rock labels, Geffen. And you're told you can't use the name City Kid. Where does the idea to name the band Tesla come from?
Well, it's the inventor, same thing the car is named after, except we were about 20 years before the car. 25, I think. We didn't know anything about Tesla. I mean, our manager and Tom Zutaut, our A&R guy, they said, look, when you go make this record, you got the whole record to come up with a name. But by the time you're finished with that record, we need a name because you can't be called City Kid, not with the way this music is. And we sat around for weeks trying to come up with a name. Chrissy Hine tried helping me and Jeff or Troy, I don't know which one was. And, we just couldn't come up with a name. So finally, we were finished, and they came to this barbecue thing that was like the wrap-up of the record, and they said, we have an idea for a name. And it was this guy, Cliff Bernstein, and he said, Tesla. And we were like, what's that? And then he told us that he was this inventor, and he invented alternating current, electricity, and that's how we came up with the name.
When you guys are responsible for back in the 80s for a lot of kids that probably looked up Tesla because of your name. It was pretty educational.
Yeah, but I mean, we knew, not much about it. And we got educated on it eventually.
I think it's cool you still have a link to him on your website.
Yeah.
And by now you had to have seen the photo of Elon Musk wearing the Tesla tour shirt.
Yeah.
That a little nod to you guys for being first to market with the name, or?
I sent him some new T-shirts, and he sent me some Tesla car T-shirts back.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
There's another.
I like Elon Musk. Yeah,
there's another Beatles parallel there. The Beatles formed Apple Records long before Apple was a major tech company, and of course Tesla was a rockin' band long before it was a car company.
Yeah, that's true.
So I got to ask this question: anybody in the band driving a Tesla?
No.
Hey Brian, let's spin some music now. Let's go back to '86 and the first song any of us heard from Tesla. What an awesome track this is, Modern Day Cowboy. What's the inspiration behind this tune?
At that time, I think, there was, Russia had shot down that Korean airliner. So it was still kind of Cold War stuff.
Tesla's Brian Wheat sitting in with us this morning. And I remember this next single, Brian, from the debut album, Mechanical Resonance, being played everywhere in 86, 87. Song Little Susie, which I got to admit, I was just floored when I found out it was a cover tune. And your version sounds nothing like the original. That was an English new wave band called PhD, and there was Little Susie's On the Up. And the only thing that I think anybody remembers about that, it was the 5th music video on MTV the day it premiered, and never saw it again. Where in the world did Tesla get the idea to not only cover that track, but to retool it the way you guys did?
Well, Ronnie Montrose actually brought us that song.
Is that right?
Yeah, on the demo sessions he did. But that song went through a lot of different variations. But the version that you hear on that first record, really Max Norman, the guy that did the Ozzy records, the first 2 Ozzy records and stuff, he worked with us, and he was responsible for kind of that arrangement and that treatment. And that's where that came from. I mean, on our first album, we had a lot of producers who wouldn't work with us. We went through a lot of guys to finally come up with the guys that actually wound up doing it. So that came from Max and Ronnie Montrose.
Let's give that one a spin. Little Susie from Tesla.
This is Back to the 80s. I'm Dennis Wood talking to Tesla's Brian Wheat. Going to take a real quick break, and we'll be right back. This is wOKW, Kerwinsville, Clearfield, DuBois.
Back to the 80s on OK 1029.
It's Dennis Wood with you. I'm joined with Tesla's Brian Wheat on the show this morning. And thank you, Brian. At this point, not only is Tesla's debut album just killer, but you guys get some awesome opening spots at some major tours. Tesla opened up for David Lee Roth on his first solo tour. Then, and this part I think is just amazing, you guys end up opening for a band that you covered back in the early days, and a band I think you say you idolized, Def Leppard. And it's the Hysteria tour, too, and Def Leppard becomes the biggest thing on the planet. What was that experience like for you?
It was great. It was the greatest tour we ever did. I mean, they're, to this day, still like family, and we've toured with them several times since then. But they treated us the best. They always have. They were great. They were mentors, and it was just an outrageous experience.
You and Joe Elliott are still tight to this day.
Yeah, me and Joe Elliott, me and Phil Collin, and me and Rick Allen are still real tight.
So in '89, Tesla's second album, Great Radio Controversy. You guys were unknowns and new to the process with that first album, but what changed writing and working out the songs for the second record as opposed to the first?
I think the major thing is that we had been on the road for 18 months and played concerts to tens of thousands of people at a time. And on the first album, we hadn't done that. We'd only played to 600 people in this club in Sacramento. So that was the main factor. We kind of had gotten a taste of playing in arenas and big festivals and stuff, and so we took that into the second album.
I want to spin the first single from the album, song that's a real fan favorite at Tesla concerts, Heaven's Trail. All right, there's Tesla, Heaven's Trail. I got Brian Wheat from Tesla, founder of the band and the bassist, on the phone this morning. Great track there, Brian, but it didn't quite perform as well as the songs from Mechanical Resonance, at least on the charts. For a little bit, you guys were worried about the sophomore jinx, but everything changes with Love Song. That song blew up. It's one of the biggest singles of '89, maybe one of the best power ballads ever released. But you guys had to convince the record company to even put it out.
Yeah, and our management. Yeah, I mean, when we did that song, they told us it's not a song, it's 3 parts. And we said, no, this is a hit. We fought tooth and nail with them, and Tom Zutaut convinced Geffen to put it out. It took like 16 weeks for that track to get to where it needed to get. But once it did, then the momentum, it was like a steamroller. But it was a long, slow build.
That's got to be one that's satisfying after the fact to say, we told you so.
Yeah, I mean, to some degree. But we used that card maybe when we shouldn't too much later in our career. It actually... because at that point after that, it was kind of hard to tell us anything because we got kind of hard-headed.
So Love Song becomes the biggest hit of your career, great radio controversy, loved by critics and fans alike. To me, you guys do a 180, and you do a totally acoustic album. You single-handedly create the unplugged genre. Nobody did that before Tesla. And that features the song that absolutely that even dwarfs Love Song with Signs. How did you guys come about doing an acoustic album?
Well, while we were on tour on the second album, we had won an award in Northern California called the BAMI Award for Best, Outstanding Rock Album or whatever. And we had just finished being on the road, and I think we had to come back with a couple days' notice, but we didn't have our gear. So we decided that we would play Love Song, just an acoustic version of it, and we worked that up. And this lady saw that night, and she happened to be partners with Boz Skaggs at a club in San Francisco called Slim. So she wrote our manager, Peter Mensch, a letter saying, I saw your band Tesla, and they performed an acoustic version of their hit Love Song. Would they be interested in playing our club and doing a full 90-minute set of, acoustic material? So he came to us and he asked us about it, and we said, hell no, we don't want to do that, man. We're a rock band. And so he kind of used reverse psychology on us. He said, well, I bet you can't do it. It's probably too difficult.
Ooh.
So that was like, okay, we'll show you. So we worked up, our songs that lent to that kind of style that we kind of were starting to figure out. And, we didn't have that many. So we picked some cover songs to fill a 90-minute set. And the truth of the matter is that, we all got to pick one, all five of us. And I picked the Beatles song because I'm a Beatle freak. And Frank picked, Truckin' because he likes the Grateful Dead. And Tommy picked, Mother's Little Helper from the Stones. And Troy picked Creedence Clearwater, which perfectly lent to it. But Jeff said, hey, what about this song from the 70s called Signs? And I had that record when I was a little kid. It came out, I think, the same year as Another Day did, Paul McCartney or something.
71, yeah.
Yeah. So that's how we picked that song, honestly. So what happened then was we're back on tour after we were just getting ready to go in and record Psychotic Supper. But Motley Crue wanted us to go out and do like 6 weeks of shows on the Dr. Feelgood tour. And so we went out to do that, and then the plan was we were going to go in and record Psychotic Supper. And they were taking like 2 and 3 days off at a time, right? They were maybe playing 3 shows a week, and we were a young band, and we needed to play 5-6 nights a week just, to keep the budgets right. So we decided, well, we'll do this acoustic show in some of these cities, right, that we did in San Francisco. That was a gas. So when we were in Boston, Frank, Jeff, and Tommy went down to WAAF in Boston, which was a big rock station, and they took 2 acoustic guitars, and they just to do an interview, and they said, will you play something live? And so they played Signs, which we had done in this acoustic show, but had never been recorded or anything, or like that. And that station started playing that live in the control room at the radio station version, and it went crazy. Like, people blew up the phones for it. So they called our record company and said, hey, this song Signs, is going crazy here in Boston. Do you have, maybe you should record it or something? And we had recorded one of the acoustic shows we did in Philadelphia on the Motley Crue tour. So we said, well, we do have this live mobile truck thing that we did, because we did it just because we thought it was cool, not that we were ever going to try to put it out as a record or whatever, just to have in the archive. So they said, well, okay, cool, maybe we'll make a little EP or something. So once we got to mixing it, it wound up being the whole album, and then that thing just took off and went through the roof right away. And MTV was the number one requested video of that year was Signs. Hey, this is Brian Wheat from Tesla, and you're back to the 80s with Dennis Wood on wOK 1029.
Back to the 80s with Dennis Wood.
You're tuned to Back to the 80s with Dennis Wood.
I'm joined with Tesla's Brian Wheat on the show this morning. And so the 5-man acoustic jam album brings you in a fan that turned out to be a friend that had to blow your mind. The legendary Jimmy Page. What did Jimmy have to say about that acoustic album, and what's that like to not only meet one of your idols, but you guys still talk today.
You know, it was about 4 years later I first met Jimmy Page. I was in London with a mutual friend of mine and a mutual friend of Jimmy's. And so we were at a David Lee Roth show at the Hammersmith Odeon. And Jimmy comes in the backstage there where we all are, and my friend Ross introduced me to Jimmy. And, I said, hello. And he said hello. And, I was very, low-key. And I said, would you like something? I got him a Coke or something, because I was going to the bar. Whatever it was we were drinking.
Just playing it cool.
And when I brought him back his drink, he said, I really like Five Man Acoustic Jam. And I said, what? He said, your album, Five Man Acoustic Jam. I said, oh, man, I didn't even think you knew who I was. He goes, of course I know who you are. You're in Tesla. We're on the same label, because he had the Outrider album. I was like, floored. And he said, you're the first band to ever do an all-live acoustic album. Because people say, well, we started the acoustic thing. We didn't. I mean, Led Zeppelin 3 was acoustic. McCartney was doing an acoustic set in the middle of Wings Over America. Peter Frampton. Lots of people were doing it. Queen was doing an acoustic set in the middle of their show. But we were the first band to put out a whole album, live album acoustic. And then, you had Nirvana and Rod Stewart and Eric Clapton that had big ones after us. So that's how I met Jimmy Page. And from that initial meeting, we just became friends. He's a dear friend of mine, and it's great. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to, I'm a huge Led Zeppelin fan. I had posters of Led Zeppelin and Jimmy on my wall, and now he's my big brother. So it's great. I'm really stoked. It's one of the highlights of my whole life and musical career is that, I became friends with him.
That's just an unbelievable story. That album was just everywhere back then, and I just think it changed the game completely. But after the success of Love Song and Signs, and again, it's one of the things that I personally love about Tesla, you probably should have put out another acoustic album, or, Psychotic Supper comes out, and the lead single off that record, that's one of my favorites. It just ripped people's faces off, Edison's Medicine. Did you have a conscious decision to get back to hard rock and metal after Love Song and Signs, or creatively, is that where you guys were at the time?
That's just where we were. We weren't going to do, because we had such a monster hit with Signs, come out and do that again. And that's, I think that was a conscious decision to come out with, the heaviest track we probably had ever done, which was Edison's Medicine.
Kind of interesting, too, that song was a tribute to Tesla. And like I said
absolutely.
earlier, that's a song that a lot of headbangers got an education about Tesla and Edison.
Yeah, the funny thing about that is MTV wouldn't play that video because they said, how do we know this is all factual? So,
Come on, MTV. I guess that was pre-Wikipedia.
I guess, but whatever. It's just a funny story 30 years later.
Yeah. Hey, let's spin that one. Edison's Medicine from Tesla on Back to the 80s. Brian Wheat with us from Tesla. Brian, What You Give, another track from Psychotic Supper, and it's a completely different sound from Edison's Medicine. And Jeff Keith writes most of the band lyrics for you?
Yeah.
I find that a great number of Tesla songs feature lyrics that are really positive and uplifting. Is that the kind of guy Jeff is?
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff's a pretty positive and uplifting guy, and he writes about things that he experiences. He doesn't write a lot of fictitious things. He's not going to write Obla Di, Obla Da, or Martha My Dear or something. He's going to write things that he kind of lives. So he's kind of that guy.
Yeah, What You Give, let's take a spin on that one.
Hey, this is Brian Wheat from Tesla. Keep that radio right there on wOK 1029.
Back to the 80s with Dennis Wood.
This is your radio time machine. Back to the 80s on wOK 1029.
It's Dennis Wood with you. I'm joined with Tesla's Brian Wheat on the show this morning, and thank you, Brian. Hey, a couple of years ago, Brian wrote his autobiography, and folks, it's an excellent read. Brian, I ended up reading your entire book in just 2 days because I couldn't put it down. And I'm not a reader. the book,
Neither
of course. Well, you're a heck of a writer, man. The book, of course, tells the story of Tesla, the rise to fame, the sex, drugs, and rock and roll. But what's equally interesting is, Brian, your personal story and how you tell it. And it all starts with the title of the book. The book is titled Son of a Milkman. And you found out in your teens the guy you thought was your dad was not your dad.
Yeah, he was my godfather. And my dad was actually the milkman.
Which you say in the book, that's a joke as old as time, but you use it as the title because in your situation it was true.
It's true, yes, absolutely true. Yeah.
And in the book, you're brutally honest about your personal struggles. You had to overcome bulimia back in the MTV days. Then you developed colitis, autoimmune disorders, and on top of that, you're real honest about how you've dealt with severe anxiety and depression throughout your life.
Yeah.
Man, I got to commend you for your bravery and your advocacy for people to get help. A great number of people deal with these issues, and I think it's really helpful to learn that there's no shame in dealing with these issues in your personal life and asking for help. Even a world-famous rock star, he struggles with it. Since the book's release, have you had people reach out and tell you about your book's honesty and maybe how that helped them in their life?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was really, because I was real apprehensive about wanting, to even talk about those things. And, that book I worked on for a few years, and there were a few different drafts, and it could have went one way or another. I didn't want to just write the history of Tesla, because it's only through my eyes. I mean, if Jeff wrote a book, that history would probably be told differently, or Frank, or, anyone else. But when I was working with Chris Epting, the guy who finally did the final version of the book with me, he was like, you should talk about these things. You could help people that suffer from, colitis or bulimia or anxiety or anything else. So that's why I did it. And I'm glad I did it. It was very cathartic. It's like letting all that go. And there is no shame in it. It did help a lot of people, and I have got a lot of messages and stuff from people saying, your book, thank you for being honest. I thought I was the only one going through that. And I'm glad I did it. But I was apprehensive about doing it. I thought, do I really want to spill out everything in front of everybody?
Well, again, thanks for writing the book, and the honesty of your story, because, there's estimates that 1 in 10 deal with some form of depression. And because of people like you that have the guts to stand up and share your story, I'm sure that inspires people that maybe even listening to this that have been apprehensive about reaching out for help. And it's a common problem, man, and, people should really reach out.
Well, thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Well, and the way that your book is written, it really just reminds me of the style of your band. Tesla's a no BS, give it to you straight, T-shirt, blue jeans kind of guys,
That's the one thing people will say about me to people. They're like, Brian ain't going to pull no punches. He's going to tell you straight up. He's not going to candy coat anything, and you might not like what he has to say, but he's being honest.
Exactly.
So that's kind of how I did the book.
How's your health now? How you feeling with everything?
I'm pretty good, as long as I eat good and I get enough rest. With the autoimmune, the rest is always the thing. If I get run down, it can creep up. But all in all, I'm doing much better, thanks.
Good. And again, you as your band, a no gimmicks band, I think that is what endears a lot of Tesla fans. Nicky Sixx back in the day called you guys the tomato farmers from Sacramento.
Yeah, he did.
But that's the thing I wanted to ask you. Tesla, no costumes, no teased up hair, no makeup. How did you guys resist the pressure to conform to that back in the 80s when that was the metal style that was everywhere?
Well, they tried to there's one photo shoot where they did that. They tried to do that with us. And we just said, look, this isn't us. We can't, we got to believe in what we're doing. This isn't what we do. And they said, well, okay, man, you're not going to get on the cover of Circus Magazine. We said, we don't care. It's okay. And, I think on one hand, it was a curse. But on the other hand, we're still sitting here 40 years later because we stayed true to who we are, and our fan base is incredibly loyal. And that's what they like about us, is that, we are just, we could be the guys next door. I think that's what they relate to us about. We couldn't do what Motley or, Poison or, bands like that were doing. And there's nothing wrong with what they're doing. It's just that wasn't us. We were more like Bad Company than versus someone that had a flamboyant image, So that's the path we chose, and we stayed true to it, and we're going on our 39th year. So
I think what's wild with Tesla too, you guys have a fan base that follows you, real similar like the Grateful Dead or Rush. There's some real Tesla heads that will follow you guys anywhere you go. Do you see a lot of familiar faces in the crowd some nights from the Tesla heads?
Yeah. There are people who have seen multiple shows. There's probably 50 to 100 people that I'll see 50 times a year. That they're always in the first couple of rows. And I think it's the music. I think there's all those songs that we put out those years, and we had a lot of radio play, and I think that's what keeps the people coming. It is. I mean, I know it, because we're certainly not on contemporary rock radio today. They're not playing Tesla, so they're playing all these new young bands, and that's just the way. That's what happens. They're not playing Def Leppard anymore,
right?
But Def Leppard's playing stadiums and Motley Crue, because of what they had done at that time that developed these followings that will support you till the end.
Now, Brian, besides music and the book, one thing that I learned about you is you're a very talented photographer and artist. The Wentworth Gallery is currently displaying some of your work, and it's what they're calling enhanced photography. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about what that is?
How it started out was we were doing this. We do this Monsters of Rock cruise. We've done it 12 times or something. And on that cruise, Rick Allen from Def Leppard was doing his artwork. And I've been taking pictures for years, and just the places I go. And so I met with a guy from the gallery. I said, "Hey, would you be interested in doing an exhibition of my photography?" And he said, "No, not really, because I only do art, and those are photographs." And I went, "Okay, fair enough." So the next day, I see the same guy, which is Christian, the guy who owns the galleries. He said, "Hey, I got an idea for you." He said, "Have you ever considered painting on your pictures?" "No, I'm not a painter. I take photographs." He said, "Well, try it. Take the picture, and we'll put it on, a medium, canvas, wood, metal, whatever, and paint on it." The key word was enhance it. So, it's like, okay, so if I took a black and white photograph of some flowers and I paint the flowers colored, he goes, "Yeah, stuff like that." So that's how it came about.
I saw some of the prints, and it's some amazing work. You're on all the socials, Instagram, Facebook, and there's some examples there that people can see of your photography.
Yeah, but I'll tell you the thing about it is that when you see a photograph of it, it doesn't translate. You got to see it in person, because you don't really get the texture and stuff.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we talked earlier about your love of all things McCartney, and you talked about coming full circle, being friends with Jimmy Page when you had him on his wall. Tesla got to record in the legendary Abbey Road Studios in London. How mind-blowing is that for you, being a Beatle fan? And I saw you playing the Hofner in that video. What kind of emotions go through your head being there and coming full circle when you were a kid spinning Revolver?
Yeah, I think when we did We Can Work It Out, it was a bit like, whoa, this is where that song was recorded, right? That whole day was an epic day for me. And doing probably We Can Work It Out in that room was pretty intense.
There's a video of that on YouTube, and it opens up with you singing, and there's a look on your face that I was like, yeah, he's in the moment. That would be mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Let's take a listen to that one. This is a fantastic track. Do you ever get nostalgic for the early club days? Like, when was the last time you played a small venue? Tesla ever show up and surprise anybody and play play a bar or a club some night?
No.
Do you want to do that in Clearfield? I can make that happen if you...
No, it's okay. That'd be kind of chaotic at this point, I think, we tried to go play a 200-seat club or something.
Tesla's on tour the rest of the summer, and earlier this year, you guys did a residency in Las Vegas, and I see you're going to go back there in late September for another one. What's your thoughts on doing a residency as opposed to traveling around on a regular tour?
You know, it's that's interesting because there are great aspects to it, and then there are aspects that aren't so great. Like, we're used to playing a show, rolling it up, and going to the next town. So to sit somewhere for 10 days is a bit, we've never done that, so that takes a little bit of getting used to. But also not having to travel is better for you, probably not getting so tired and worn out. But the shows were great, the turnout was great, and we're going back and we're doing another one. So it was all good, man.
Tesla's got a brand new album out now. It's Full Throttle Live from Tesla. Brian, tell us about that album. Where was that recorded?
That was recorded at the Sturgis Bike Rally. And, you know, we record every night because our in-ear system that how we hear things has a Pro Tools rig attached to it. So I just went in to go mix one song, thinking, well, we'll put something out for the fans. And it sounded so good, I started mixing a couple more, and then it just, kind of like that acoustic album, it just was like, well, we should just make this an album. And that's what happened.
Well, it's a fantastic sounding album. The crowd sounds like they were amped up, and it's got a brand new Tesla song on it as well. And we're gonna play that now. But hey, Brian, I know you got to get going. I've taken so much of your time, and hey, thanks for taking the time to sit down with us and talk this morning. And everybody is excited. The buzz is good. We can't wait to see Tesla live in concert at the Clearfield County Fair Wednesday night, August 2nd. One last thing, Brian, before I let you go. I've got a pair of tickets to the concert here to give away. We're going to open up the phone lines here at the station now. Brian, what numbered caller should we give the Tesla tickets to?
Number 19.
You heard the man. Start dialing now, 814-768-WOKW. Caller number 19 is going to see Tesla live in concert Wednesday night at the Clearfield County Fair. Can't wait to see the show, my man.
I'll see you then. Come say hello.
I will, Brian. Thanks.
Okay, bye-bye.
Let's take a listen now to brand new music from Tesla. It's the new single, Time to Rock.